A packed room. A quick, dismissive laugh. A snap judgment based on nothing but the color of someone's skin. This kind of thing happens all the time, in stores, on sidewalks, and in offices. But when that laughter echoes inside a hall of justice, a place that's supposed to be all about fairness, it carries a much heavier weight. It shows a crack, not just in one person, but in the foundation of the system itself. Now, the story you're about to hear is a work of fiction. It isn't about one specific judge or clerk. It's a story inspired by the very real experiences of countless black professionals who've been met with prejudice in places where they absolutely should be met with respect. It's a story that poses a crucial question: what happens when the person you look down on is the one holding the gavel? Hook. The courtroom was buzzing. You know the sound, a low hum of lawyers, families, and defendants waiting for things to get started. At the clerk's desk, a woman named Carol ran the show with a kind of bored authority. After 20 years as a court clerk, she figured she'd seen it all. She sorted files with sharp, efficient moves, every now and then sharing a smirk with a bailiff leaning against the wall. Then, the main doors swung open. A black woman in a simple but elegant navy blue suit walked in. She had a quiet confidence about her, her eyes scanning the room, taking in the fancy wood paneling and the state seal on the wall. As she walked past the clerk's desk, Carol's eyes locked onto her. She gave the bailiff a tiny nudge. A quiet, breathy laugh slipped out, a sound of pure contempt. She leaned in and whispered, "Looks like someone's lost. Probably stumbled in here for a traffic ticket." The bailiff chuckled. The woman in the suit didn't even flinch. She just kept walking toward the front of the courtroom, her face unreadable, her purpose unclear. Carol watched her, a smug little smile on her face, completely confident in her judgment. Section 1, The Escalation. The woman in the navy suit didn't sit in the gallery with everyone else. Instead, she walked right up to the empty prosecution table and set down her leather satchel. She pulled out a pen and a notebook, her movements calm and focused. This wasn't part of Carol's usual routine, and it clearly bugged her. A clerk's job is to keep things in order, and this woman was a disruption. "Excuse me," Carol called out, her voice dripping with condescension. "The gallery is for the public. You can't be there." The woman looked up, her gaze firm. "I'm fine right here, thank you." The politeness seemed to just make Carol even more annoyed. She pushed her chair back and marched toward the woman. "No, you're not fine. This area is for officers of the court. Are you an attorney?" She asked it like an accusation, as if the answer was obviously no. "I have business with the court," the woman replied, her voice perfectly even. Carol let out another disbelieving little laugh. "Everyone has business with the court. That's why there are seats in the back. Now, please, move before I have the bailiff escort you." She waved a hand toward the gallery, already turning away like the matter was closed. At the defense table, a young public defender who saw the whole thing looked incredibly uncomfortable. He knew Carol's reputation. He'd seen her treat people of color with barely hidden disgust for years. But this was different. This was bolder, more public. He shot a nervous look at his client. The woman in the suit, however, didn't move. She just stood her ground, her unwavering calm seeming to rattle the clerk more than anything else could. The buzz in the room started to die down as more people noticed the standoff. Carol's face flushed with anger. This was her courtroom, her territory, and she was being ignored. She was about to really let her authority fly when the bailiff, sensing the mood had shifted, stepped forward. "Ma'am, is there a problem?" he asked, speaking to the woman but looking at Carol for his cue. Before she could answer, the side door to the judge's chambers opened. A court officer stepped out. He scanned the room, and his eyes landed on the woman in the navy suit. A look of recognition, and respect, washed over his face. "All rise," the officer's voice boomed, slicing through the tension. Everyone in the courtroom, including a very confused and annoyed Carol, got to their feet. They all turned to the judge's bench, expecting to see the familiar, older face of Judge Albright, who had run this court for the last 10 years. But the door to the chambers stayed shut. Instead, the woman in the navy suit moved. She walked calmly from the table to the center of the room, right in front of the judge's bench. She went up the 3 short steps, her heels echoing in the dead silent room. Then, with a grace that had everyone's attention, she reached for the black robe draped over the high-backed leather chair. She slipped it on. As she turned to face the courtroom, the officer spoke again, his voice now filled with a formal reverence. The Honorable Judge Michelle Carter, now presiding. You could hear a collective gasp ripple through the room. Lawyers, defendants, everyone, they all just stared, trying to process what just happened. But no one was more shocked than Carol. The smug mask on her face just crumbled. The color drained from her cheeks, and her mouth fell open. Her eyes went wide with a dawning, terrifying realization. The woman she had laughed at, the woman she had dismissed as being in the wrong place, the woman she was about to have kicked out, was her new boss. Judge Carter looked out over the courtroom, her gaze passing over the stunned faces until it landed right on Carol. She held her stare for a long, quiet moment. There wasn't any anger in the judge's eyes. No triumph. Just a deep, heavy disappointment. The entire courtroom held its breath, watching a silent, devastating shift of power. The ugly laughter from a few minutes ago was now gone, replaced by a crushing, deafening silence. CTA, call to action. That moment of karma is satisfying, right? But it's really just a symptom of a much bigger problem. If you agree that our justice system has to do better and that bias has no place in our courts, do us a favor, hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps keep this conversation alive. Section 3, The Fallout and the Moral. Judge Carter took her seat. You may be seated, she said, her voice in full command of the room. As everyone else sat, Carol was still frozen, standing alone in the middle of the floor. Ms. Martinez, the judge said, her voice calm but firm. I believe your duties require you to be at your desk. Those words broke the spell. Carol scurried back to her station, her hands trembling as she fumbled with some papers. She kept her eyes glued to her desk, unable to look up. Judge Carter then addressed the court. Good morning. Let me begin my first day by making something crystal clear. This courtroom is a place of law. But the law is meaningless without respect. Respect for the institution, for the process, and for every single person who walks through those doors, no matter their race, their background, or why they're here. There is no hierarchy of dignity in this room. That is all. She called the first case, her tone shifting to business. But her message hung in the air, a direct shot at what had just happened. For the rest of the day, Carol was a ghost. Her loud, bossy attitude was gone, replaced by a meek, quiet efficiency. The smirks and whispers stopped. Every time the judge spoke, the clerk flinched. Her humiliation was public and absolute. Her authority, built on a foundation of prejudice, had been demolished in an instant. This story, while fictional, highlights a reality that is backed by some sobering facts. The clerk's prejudice isn't just a personal flaw, it's a symptom of the systemic bias that infects the American justice system. In 2023, a UN-appointed expert group reported that systemic racism is pervasive in U.S. police and justice systems, calling it a legacy of slavery and segregation. This isn't just about overt racism. It's about implicit bias, the unconscious stereotypes that affect our actions. Studies have shown that even judges harbor the same kinds of implicit biases as the general population, with one study finding a large majority of white judges more strongly associated black faces with negative words. This bias has devastating, real-world consequences. According to UN experts, black people in the U.S. are 4.5 times more likely to be incarcerated than white people. That disparity isn't just about crime rates, it's woven into the system. A 2023 report from the U.S. Sentencing Commission found that black men received federal sentences that were 13.4% longer than white men for similar crimes. These aren't just numbers, they represent shattered lives. They are the result of a million tiny cuts, a dismissive laugh from a clerk, a tougher charge from a prosecutor, a jury that sees a stereotype instead of a person. Wrongful convictions are a tragic result of this, with the Innocence Project reporting that mistaken eyewitness identification played a role in about 69% of DNA-based exonerations. Conclusion. The story of the judge and the clerk feels good because it delivers a rare moment of instant karma. We get to see prejudice meet an immediate and powerful consequence. But in the real world, accountability is rarely so quick. The fight against systemic racism in the justice system isn't a movie, it's a marathon, not a sprint. It's being led by organizations like the NAACP Legal Defense Fund and the National Association for Pretrial Services Agencies, which push for reforms like implicit bias training in sentencing reform. But even training has shown limited long-term effects, which suggests the solutions have to be deeper and more structural. Real change requires more than just hoping for dramatic, movie-like moments. It requires us to admit that the problem is, as a UN report put it, a menacing pattern and not just a few bad apples. It means demanding transparency, holding officials accountable, and supporting reforms that aim to build a system where a person's dignity isn't judged by the color of their skin. The woman in our story didn't have to say a single word to expose the prejudice she faced. Her presence, her excellence, her position, that's all it took. Her story is a reminder that while the halls of justice might have flaws, they aren't broken beyond repair. They can be reclaimed and reformed, one courtroom at a time, until the day comes when no one is ever made to feel like they're in the wrong room.